Welcome, welcome. My name is Selena Leal. I am a coach here with Wellness Coach, a meditation and yoga instructor, and also a transformational coach. And it is my joy to be hosting this panel with our Dr. Eric Razor. So, welcome, Eric.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction, Selena. And it's my joy to be here with everybody today to talk about the power of mentoring. This is an enormous topic. We're going to get into a short story about it. We're going to hit some hot tips on how to get a mentor. We're going to talk about the ideal features and aspects of a mentoring relationship, and also hit upon how organizations can adopt or fine tune their mentoring programs that are either not yet in place or are in place and looking for some augmentation. The fact of the matter is, everyone starts off the same way, including myself. And I remember starting off my own business the same as everyone: no money, no customers, no business strategy. And I realized I need a mentor. And you can read countless books and listen to countless podcasts. I listened to one today, ironically, with the CEO of Disney, and he was talking about the enormous impact that having mentors in his professional career had upon his success and his strategy and his outcomes. And really, ultimately, what we're talking about is leadership. So, I remember thinking to myself, well, how can I find a mentor? I don't have one. I don't know where to get one. And what occurred to me was, just like everything else, when you're starting something fresh, the best people to turn to are friends and family. So I did exactly that. And I reached out to a close friend of mine who I recalled his father was a retired C-suite business executive who was extremely successful, was a real, what we would probably call a guru in many disciplines, including marketing, including strategy, including pricing, including advertising and sales strategies and negotiations. And I picked up the phone or sent out an email, I don't recall which one, and I got in touch with him and shared with him my interests, my objectives, my goals. And from there, the rest is history. He instantly welcomed the opportunity to be my mentor and was for many, many years and still is in many aspects, not exactly in the way that it all started. But essentially, this was a transformational relationship that really was the guiding star that helped me identify my objectives and meet those objectives and elevate myself to my full potential. And this is exactly what we're going to talk about today, and how you can do the same thing with a very simple plan, with some very simple steps, and within an organization, really having a template that you can implement to make it successful for your team, for your organization at large. So let's go ahead and get off into some deeper discussion on this.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I love how relatable that is, kind of starting with the beginning of an experience and seeing how it can develop with a mentor. As a reminder, for all of you joining again, thank you for being here with us today. Welcome if you're on YouTube as well. If you're here with us on the app, you can use the chat feature or the Q&A to send us a question. This is an interactive panel. Dr. Eric would love to hear from you. And you can also click on the raised hand icon, and this will allow us to actually unmute you so we can hear your voice, and Dr. Eric can connect with you in that way. If
Yes,
you
please
are,
reach out.
yes, yes, please. And if you are on YouTube, as a reminder, we can't interact from that feature, but if you download the Wellness Coach app, we'll have that opportunity. So let's dive in. Eric, how is a mentor different from a coach?
Yep. So it's really important distinction, and you're going to have different responses on this, but the way that I look at it is coaching is very practical and strategic for a specific objective, right? There's something that you're stuck on, you're working on, you want to get through it, and you want some very precise niche feedback that has a very concise beginning and an end period. I like that framework because it gives definable goals and definable outcomes, and it gives the individual, the coachee, an opportunity to do some specific work, some research, some learning, perhaps some practice of some sort. Whereas mentoring is a longer term relationship. There's like a real long arch to this. And you want to think about it that this is someone that you're really confiding in your deepest secrets, your deepest desires, your passions, and of course your fears and your struggles. And that's ubiquitous across all mentoring relationships. It's a trusted confidant. If you want to think about it in a Star Wars metaphor, this is your Yoda. And you don't need Yoda every day. You need that teaching, and you go out and you do your practice, you do your research, you implement the wisdom of the Force, if you will, and you always have your mentor to go back to. So that's a rough framework that I like to think about with. I'm not a big fan of long-term coaching. I think if it's going to take a long term, my view is people that are seeking coaching really have the talent within themselves. And it's just a matter of identifying that particular talent and helping them amplify that in a very specific manner. Whereas mentoring, again, we really look at sort of long-term guidance, tacit wisdom that is timeless.
Mm. I love that distinction, and I love the Yoda reference. It really brings the wisdom of that mentor relationship. That's beautiful. How can having a mentor benefit our lives?
Yeah. It's almost endless. But you want to think about your mentor as someone who is invested in your professional development, right? So if you're on this class, your professional development is important to you. And mentors are the people who are going to exponentially elevate your professional development. They're going to see your blind spots. They're going to give you honest, constructive criticism. They're going to help amplify your strengths. They're going to help elevate your weaknesses. They're going to help you navigate obstacles and challenges and fears. So, these are all of the specific benefits that you will immediately experience in your very first session. It's almost like a real aha moment, because sometimes, these blind spots, they catch us, and it's like, I couldn't even imagine seeing it that way. They have the advantage of having time and experience under their belt, right? And time and experience brings out and brings forth that wisdom that you can accelerate and leverage, right, in a sort of very frictionless way to your benefit in these relationships.
Mm, excellent. Thank you. We just had something come through the Q&A. It's from an anonymous attendee, and it says, I have had mentors, but they were limited to business relationship. What can we do to be fully open with a mentor?
Yep. So mentorship requires transparency, and what we're speaking about here is, when you're looking for mentorship from your manager or someone else, you have to be aware of what I'm going to call sort of, the implicit power dynamic that exists, right? And if you're concerned about being transparent and that power dynamic, because who knows, maybe you'll get mentored and then you'll take that person's position, right? Or maybe you'll have more success than can be palpable to the rest of the people on your team, or maybe you'll be perceived as getting special treatment. So you have to be sensitive to those dynamics. You want to go a couple circles out within your organization to really establish that, what I'm going to call rapport and confidence and trust, so that there isn't going to be any conflict of interest within that mentoring relationship. That's how I would explore it. The other way to do it is, to go cross industry, right? So it could be someone who's in the same career track as you in a different organization, and you connect with them and you begin your mentoring relationship, and that sort of gets rid of the conflict of interest dynamic.
Excellent. I love this, your way of having very specific action-oriented feedback. And we have something else that's come through from an anonymous attendee, possibly the same one. It says, these are great insights on why having a mentor is important to your growth in your career and life. What are some actionable steps to ask someone to be your mentor?
Yep, that's great. We're cutting to the chase here. So, one of the first things that you really need to do is you need to sit down with yourself and get your journal out. I'm a big fan of journaling. People who watch my last class know that. It's a great way to go back and reflect and really build your self-awareness. And mentoring is built upon a framework of self-awareness. You have to sit down, and I challenge you to write this question to yourself: why do I want a mentor? Right? Simple question. Okay. You need to put some time into that. Meditate, reflect, talk with people, trusted friends, but really think about, why do you want a mentor? Right. And then when you come up with your why, that is sort of, your ground zero of defining how to take the next actionable step. Okay, so that's the what or the why, however you want to frame it. And then the next step is the who. Who is capable of filling that mentor role for you? Okay, and the place that I again like to start is just like I did in my example, and I'm not saying it's the best way or the only way, but it's certainly the easiest way, the path of least resistance, is making a list of family and friends, okay, and identifying, are any of these people someone who can mentor me? And then you go the next layer out, the next concentric ring outside of that. Who are people that are connected to these family and friends who may be a candidate for mentoring me, right? So that's your next ring. And at that point in time, you may want to reach out to some of those people and say, look, I'm interested in having a mentor. I'm interested in having a mentor because, and then you fill in the blank with your why. Is there anyone that you think could be a match, or anyone that you can recommend that you would introduce me to, or you could give an introduction to, right? To start a conversation. For me, it was a little bit more direct. I knew the who, I knew his mentoring talent, and it was a matter of making the ask, right, in a very humble way, and being receptive to that. And to my great fortune, it worked out. That may not always be the case, but this is how you initiate the process, and you just keep repeating that process until it's completely exhausted. If you do that work, right, if you make those lists, if you make that effort, you make those reach outs, and then when you finally get to the person, you can start your conversation usually with an email, or it could be a phone call, depending on the nature of the relationship, and simply say, look, this is who I am. This is what I'm working on. Here's a couple things about me that you might like to know, some personal information, some professional information, things that you really want to hit on your top talent features, right? What are you curious about? What are you passionate about? What have you been persevering about? What really matters to you the most, that you're really willing to commit on a long-term basis towards a mentoring relationship with goals, with a real expert who can guide you through that. When you do that, you're really setting a nice stage and a nice platform to open a door to a mentoring relationship.
Excellent. I really love, I know I just said this, but I really love the specific action steps that you're offering us. It feels very clear, very concise. We just had something come through the chat. It's from Pilar, and it says, we live in a busy schedule. So, how the leaders can be my mentor?
How can leaders be your mentor? You know, it depends is the answer. But we're very busy. Okay, so let's tackle the busyness. Yes, we're busy. Everybody's busy. All high performers are busy. Okay, that's an excuse in my book. Okay, if mentoring is important to you, you have to carve out the time for it. So what am I talking about with time? The time is really, this a mentoring relationship is generally not, a weekly meeting or even a bi-weekly meeting. It's really sort of what I like to call on demand. It's very dynamic, right? Your first meeting with your mentor is going to touch upon, some of your core objectives. They're probably going to give you a homework assignment, and you're going to spend, a significant amount of time thinking about that, doing some research, and really being concrete and identifiable about what you want to do next. And then you'll have your next meetup, and it sort of repeats that process. How do you reach out to leaders? Well, you have your list of leaders. So I would say that you really need to be very specific and precise about which leader possesses the attributes, or which leader possesses the wisdom that you're seeking most, right? It's very easy to go in very different directions. And you want to think about not just short-term professional goals, but also long-term. And as you narrow down sort of your objectives and you narrow down that list of leaders, one should rise to the top. And if you're struggling with it, make a scale of 1 to 10 and start assigning numbers to somebody, right? So you have someone who's a 7, someone who's a 7.5, someone who's an 8, and then you get a 8.75. The 8.75 person is the person to reach out. Yes, those leaders are probably busy, but if you are able to, as I just discussed, really articulate and share information about yourself, your personal ambitions, your professional goals, some of your talents, and express your keen interest to have someone mentor you in a particular capacity, that's a way to approach busy leaders, so to speak. Now, one little footnote to this conversation. maybe all mentoring relationships don't necessarily have to be long term, okay? Maybe it starts with a shorter term commitment. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Relationships evolve. They're dynamic. There's nothing set in stone with this. So even if it turns out to be a 1 or 2 session mentoring relationship, that may be enough to get your pump primed, right? And then that person who's a mentor can introduce you to your next mentor. Okay, so don't. I guess the notion is to think openly about mentoring, even though I'm talking about it in a little bit more of a structured framework.
Hmm. Great. Thank you, Pilar. And Pilar says thanks for that response.
You're welcome.
Excellent. Let's move on and then we'll answer a couple more questions. And I have a question for everyone listening, as well as Dr. Eric. And I'd love to hear from you. So please drop your response in the chat or raise your hand so we can hear from you. And the question I have is, how have mentors impacted your life? Dr. Eric, you shared a little bit already about this in the beginning of your story, but I'd love to hear more. How have mentors impacted your life?
Yeah. So mentors are really good um, at pointing out not just your strengths but your weaknesses, right? So I'm going to talk about that for a moment. Everybody has weaknesses, and I like to put it in a framework as relative strengths and relative weaknesses, right? And who is going to be candid with you about your relative weaknesses? And I'll never forget the advice, one time from early on from my mentor. It may have been the first session. I don't recall which one it was, but his remark was, perfection, nothing less. Okay. Perfection, nothing less. So what that meant to me was there's never excuses to be tired, to be lazy, to be late for meetings, to allow obstacles to get in the way of meeting accomplishments. It meant making a committed effort and a discipline aimed at perfection, right? Now, does that mean that it was accomplished? Of course not, right? Unexpected things happen, but it was, you could call it a mantra, you could call it a slogan, but perfection, is really looking at the bullseye. And anytime that I missed it, okay, it was an opportunity to go back and reflect and identify what were the weaknesses that got in the way, both mine, environmental, situational, right? Not to point out a personal flaw, but really to have a process session and digest and make it a learning, teachable moment, if you will, right? To understand what got in the way of perfection. So again, I think, really having that relationship, that mentoring relationship where someone can confront you, okay, in a compassionate way is really beneficial. And that's how it was for me.
Hmm. Yes, I feel that completely. I've had a mentor for the last almost 20 years, and that has been so much of the gift of that relationship. Like you were saying earlier, those blind spots, there are always things that we don't see inside of ourselves. So to have someone who can hopefully compassionately make us more aware so that we can move into greater mastery with whatever it is we're involved with, it's such an amazing gift.
It is. It is. And before we shift into another question, I just want to speak to the organizational culture just with a couple comments and remarks about that. With two enormous, colossal workforces coming in, the Gen Zs and the millennials already in place, survey after survey, research after research, HBR, McKinsey, you name it, they want mentors. They want mentoring relationships in their organization. They are raising their hand saying, we want a mentor. So, for organizations and people that are decision makers, participating in this class, this is something that will make a huge impact on not only hiring the right people, but keeping the right people and having some control over that attrition. So it's really important to have a mentoring program in place. Kraft did an interesting thing that was written up where they engaged this process called reverse mentoring, right? So it's not just, the experienced, wise, seasoned C-suite executive mentoring the younger employee. It's a structure that's dynamic, where it's reciprocal and there's parity in the mentoring relationship. Meaning, for example, the younger generations that are really dialed into new trends and fads and things that stick, in terms of business culture and in terms of sales and marketing, they have a valuable contribution to make. And the seasoned executives can benefit from that reverse mentoring opportunity just in as much as the younger worker can as well. So that's something to think about. And then one last organizational point is, one way to start a program is a little bit softer, meaning instead of just, having a structure and a system to try to assemble and match people up in a sort of business profile or a talent profile way. Another easier way might be to approach it with what are your interests, right? And just starting mentoring meetups with people that shared common interests, whether it's playing tennis, whether it's a musical instrument or playing in a band, whatever those are, that can spark an opportunity to build a relationship. It may not evolve into a mentoring relationship, but that's a very organic way to start building natural relationships that may not occur within the organization. And that can lead to potentially, making an internal introduction to someone that is not connected and bridging a mentoring relationship there. So that's another strategy that you can think about building in your organization for really upping your mentoring program.
Love that. Another great man, offering of action steps. Uh, we are at the 20-minute mark for anyone who needs to leave. Thank you so much for being here, but we're going to stay on and answer a few more questions while we have time. We have some more comments coming in from the anonymous attendee, possibly the same one. It says, would it be helpful to offer helping them any way you can in exchange for their time to mentor you? Maybe this is in reference to the leader question from earlier.
Right. Yeah, so that's, it's interesting with mentoring relationships. There's always sort of this notion of reciprocity in relationships that we try to be mindful about. The thing that's unique about mentoring relationships is that the benefit, and when you talk to people that have done this, so you can go test what I'm about to say, but when you talk to people that have, and I've been in the mentor role as well, but when you talk to people that have served as mentors or you hear them speak about their mentoring, it gives them great delight in the opportunity to be a mentor, right? So the satisfaction comes in making a significant impact on another person's life. There's no expectation for compensation or for, favors or for, additional work. So I would not think about that. And if that's the expectation, in my mind, that sort of sours, the water a little bit in the mentoring, and that's probably not a right match.
Hmm. Dee responded to the last bit of advice you were offering, and he says, great idea. And we have one more from the anonymous attendee, likely the same commenter. It says, I am just a shy person. I feel uncomfortable asking someone to be a mentor. Any advice?
Yep. So the first is, everyone falls on the continuum of being shy, right? Some people are more shy than others. Um, so that's something that I would take a look at, right? So how can you become more assertive? And there's many, many ways to overcome that in a very natural way. And I would suggest that, overcoming the shyness is something that might deserve some work. It'd be helpful. Um, from, the mental health model that I come from, there's very easy, simple, quick skills that you can learn to build assertiveness. So anybody that's working on overcoming shyness, there's assertiveness training and little tips and tricks and rehearsals that you can practice, first in session with a therapist, and then secondly, you can apply it in the real world. So I think that will be helpful for any relationship, right? Not just the mentoring ones. But again, I think we live in a digital world, so to make it easier with the shyness and the mentoring, again, if you do it over an email, that should sort of take away some of the resistance about meeting with somebody in person or approaching them directly. I think that's an easy tactic to take with that. And maybe practice, writing the email and have somebody that you trust review it, to see if you're being a good communicator and you're really expressing what you want to express, or maybe it needs to be a little bit more assertive, a little bit more direct. That's something that I would do.
I would love to be on a panel with you about these tips and tactics for overcoming shyness. It's funny because here I am hosting this session and leading many sessions of all types, and I still feel shyness. And so I have my own little practices, but I would uh, love to hear that from you sometime.
All right, we'll chalk that up for something in
Yes,
April.
yes. So moving on, we'll answer one more question and then we'll begin to close up. I would love to hear what what qualities make up a great mentor.
Yep. So it really mirrors the qualities of a great leader. And I'm going to focus on one at least, depending on the time that we have. And that quality is humility. Okay. Time and time again, when you look at the research about leadership and what makes a great leader, it's humility. It's they are in the shadows of the organization, right? Or they're at least spending a lot of time there. They're not using the word I, they're using the word we, or they're using the word you in reference to the entirety of the organization. So humility is a really important um, psychological competency, trait, personality characteristic that I would certainly look for. And that really speaks to the authenticity, of the person. And they will have, and that sort of bridges, I guess, into the next trait, which is compassion, right? And you want someone who's compassionate because they've been in your shoes before, right? They started off with nothing. They started off, as a new worker, a new employee. They started off, wanting to, knock it out of the park, get the grand slam, reach for the stars, and had to start somewhere. No one woke up and, as a leader one day, and got out of bed and it was instant leadership. So with mentors, you really want to look for the humility and the compassion. The other traits sort of speak for themselves, right? Because they've demonstrated with their own professional development. So things like, lifelong learning, things like perseverance and grit, right? Things like curiosity, being well-rounded, having great relationships and a solid reputation. To sum it all up, you want to look for quality people.
Hmm, I love that. I resonate so deeply with humility. Something in my heart just softens, even imagining being with a mentor who has humility. And I notice that when I'm with people who are humble, there is that quality of compassion, that quality of the heart, which I feel for me personally allows me to be more open, to be more receptive to feedback, to receive. So I love that so much.
Yeah, yeah.
So we are coming to our closing time. Any kind of a practice you would like to lead us through, or any kind of final wisdom as we
Yeah,
come?
so I want to give a very short parting story. So I had a woman executive with MSNBC come to me for some coaching back in the fall, and one of the objectives was to um, find a mentor. Now, the irony is we went through some practical exercises like I talked today, like make the list, and she's making the list, and these are basically famous people and really well recognized leaders. And I said to her, I said, these are people you're in touch with regularly. Oh, yeah, of course. Well, there's your mentor list. You just have to figure out which is the best one, right? And it was ironically, right, an aha moment for her. Like she already had her list of mentors, and from there, connected with them in varying capacities. So do the work, do the homework. I'm going to challenge everyone in 30 days. If you don't have a mentor, find one, connect with one, make those first steps to reach out, and you will have an awesome year that will really blow your expectations away, how your growth and performance accelerates because of having that mentoring relationship. Good luck with it. I want to hear about it.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, so much for being here. Thank you, Dr. Eric. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Today.